Today we're going to talk about the subject of volume and why volume is one of the most important things you need to focus on while doing your mixes or anything in music production. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, and welcome to Distinct Mastering. My name is Freddie. I'm a mastering engineer, producer, DJ, and president of Sleeping Giant Music. For over 2 decades, I've helped artists grow their careers, and now I'm here to help you with your music production skills. If you'd like a free stereo mastered sample from me, check the link below in my description. Now let's chat about the subject of volume and why it is ever so important. Okay, volume is everything in your music production. In your mix, it's ever so important from every stage of the way, from the recording process to the mixing process, even to the mastering. You know, volume happens even in the end user level. The user has the one control to turn up the volume, or they could turn up the bass, turn up the highs, but at the end of the day, it's still relative volume. That being said, when you're doing your mixes, before you start applying all these effects and doing random things, I suggest you try to get your volume right. You might find things not sitting right in the mix, or your mix is thrown off. It's usually related to volume. If you're not aware, panning is also volume. It's just the volume between the left and the right. So when you start to pan something, it usually gets a little louder in relation to your mix. So what I like to do is if I'm panning something, I like to turn things down a little even further. I often find that younger producers try to overmix things. And when I say that, you add a new sound and you're excited about it. You want to hear it, so you mix it hot. There's something to be said about actually tucking things back and making them ever so apparent. I mean, even so apparent that maybe you can't even barely hear it. But if you mute it, you know it's gone. That is one trick to mixing, is just putting those things back there that give you that feel or that texture, but that aren't actually apparently there. You know, I like to do cool things with vocals, for example, where I like to pitch things down, and I speak about this in my little Altar Boy video, so if you missed that, I'll leave a link up above. And I do this quite a lot, but what happens is you don't know it's there. But when you mute that lower octave version, it's gone, and something is missing. And so it's just mixed ever so slightly. Now let's get on another subject with volume. If you go too hot, you now distort, and you're going to have a harder time mixing because things just aren't going to be balanced. Nothing is working. You know, you've got to give yourself a little headroom along the way. You've got a gain stage along the way. And that leads me to the next thing. When you're talking about gain staging, it's very important to make sure that the volume from unit to unit, whether that be analog gear or plugins, it stays consistent. If you put an EQ up and you boost 6 dB, you might be clipping that plugin. Another thing to pay attention to is if you actually cut a bunch of frequencies, you've cut down on volume, so you might want to boost that back up. That depends on what you're doing. And some analog recreations, like UAD plugins, operate at a nominal volume. So it's very important that you gain stage things along the way and pay attention to that. The nominal volume for UAD plugins is -18. So keep that in mind when you are gain staging plugin to plugin. If you overload the input of an analog recreated plugin like a UAD, it's just going to be distorted. Now, there might be times when you want that, and I'm not one to say there's rules to this. There are right ways to do things, there are wrong ways to do things, but sometimes those rules are meant to be broken. Now, volume is one of those things, though, that it is very important. It's very important at every step of the way. Like I said, it's very important in recording. If you're recording a guitarist or a vocalist and you record too low, you're going to have too much noise floor. And when you bring that volume up later, you're going to hear that noise floor. If you record too hot, you might overload the mic preamp, or you might clip in the DAW or clip in the preamp. You never know. Depends what you're using. But it's very important to get a good volume. and hit the DAW and gain stage along the way. And that is one of the most important things that I had to learn when I was producing music at a young age. I oftentimes would try to mix things a little too high. I had to learn to tuck back, and I had to learn to get things to sit right in the mix. And what I eventually learned years ago was that the trick is really volume. It's even when you're using an EQ, you're just adjusting the apparent volume of a specific frequency. So I suggest you really pay attention to volume in your music productions. And that's a brief overview on the subject of volume. If you have any questions, be sure to shoot me a comment down below. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and the bell notification will keep you up to date. Once again, my name is Freddie from Distinct Mastering, and have a great day.